Welcome back to Fed Up. This is episode 2. This is a series that I have dedicated to exposing the food industry and the bad nutrition advice that we get today. You don't want to miss out. There is lots of juicy information in here, and it will help you understand more why we have the food pyramid that we do today, or the nutrition guidelines that we have today, and where did they actually come from? Today's episode, we are covering the big fat lie. I will be exposing how seed oils came about and how they started being recommended over animal fats in the standard American diet. It is not what you think. In the 1800s, there weren't really widespread railroads yet, or highways even, so the common way to ship things was by boat. This allowed for Cincinnati to become a hotspot for distributing pork because of their vicinity to the Mississippi River, and this city became known as Porkopolis because of their sheer amount of pork that they would distribute throughout the southern United States during that time. The reason people chose pork over beef was because pigs are smaller animals and it's a lot easier to distribute it before the meat goes bad, and they had practices to, of course, preserve the meat as well. I know salt pork was a popular thing back in the early centuries, and that was, pork in a jar buried in salt, and that was a way to preserve it, and then people could add it to their foods and it would season the food. They didn't even need to get their own salt because it was so salty. But beef was a lot more difficult because it was such a large amount of meat that couldn't get distributed very properly. So pork was the main meat that they had back then in the US. Because of that, pork fat was used a lot to make soaps and candles, and it was in very high demand to make these different everyday essentials. During the 1870s, a depression hit all of the US, and two citizens of Porkopolis would come to join forces in order to save their business. William Proctor brought his candle business to the US after it burnt down in England, and James Gamble fled Ireland during the Great Potato Famine, and he became a soap manufacturer. The two men just happened to marry two sisters that lived in Cincinnati, so they came to know each other after becoming family. At the time, soap was sold in big wheels, and people would cut off parts of it to use it, so they'd be buying it in bulk essentially. William and James came up with the idea of individually wrapped soap bars, so that was kind of the beginning stages of their business. Now, in order to find success in doing this way and get people to want to buy their soap in smaller amounts, they had to drastically reduce their cost of production in order to make their product cheap enough to be in demand. They first started with a few different concoctions, and what they came up with was a mix of palm oil and coconut oil, and started making soap that way because animal fat was way too expensive at the time because it was in such high demand for production. What was fascinating is that these brothers first created a soap that could float in water, which became very useful for laundry and dishes. The two men were finding great success with this business that they decided to go ahead and patent a name and really get the ball rolling on this. I don't know which one of them, I think it might have been James Gamble, but I'm not 100% sure, drew inspiration from a Bible verse, Psalm 45:8, which led them to trademark their brand Ivory. I think we've all heard of Ivory soap, right? Cottonseed oil was a waste product of cotton production. So there was no use for it. It was basically garbage. And the brothers had a bright idea. Well, this would be such a cheap way to get some oil to make our products. In 1902, they formed the Buckeye Cotton Oil Company so that they could keep a steady supply of cottonseed oil for their production. Now, something to note is that cottonseed oil is cloudy red and bitter before processing due to a phytochemical known as gossypol. Gossypol. I don't know exactly how to pronounce it, but gossypol. I'll put it up on the screen. Now, this specific phytochemical is currently used as male birth control in China. It is also toxic to animals. It causes a dangerous spike in potassium. It causes organ damage and can result in paralysis. This is not something that is edible, and the fact it's used as male birth control should tell you as well that that is not going to be good for your hormone production. How do we process this? How do we turn this into something useful? Because polyunsaturated fats are liquid. Well, we can thank the process of hydrogenation. We've all heard of that, right? Hydrogenation was discovered by Edwin Kaiser, a German chemist, and in 1907 he wrote to Procter & Gamble to let them know about this new discovery of where he could turn a liquid oil into a solid. I'm not very good with the science stuff, but I read this the other day because I wanted to try to understand the process of hydrogenation. So I'm going to read this to you. Maybe you'll understand it pretty well. There's a lot of chemistry terms. I'm just not a big science person. Hydrogenation is a chemical reaction between molecular hydrogen and another compound or element, usually in the presence of a catalyst such as nickel, palladium, or platinum. The process is commonly employed to reduce or saturate organic compounds. So essentially the short term would be that they take this chain of polyunsaturated fats and they attach hydrogen to it. They essentially would use an emulsification process to get the hydrogen to stick. And now it becomes this new molecule with the extra hydrogen, which would cause it to become mostly solid. The same catalysts and conditions that are used for hydrogenation reactions can also lead to isomerization of the alkenes from cis to trans. This process is of great interest because hydrogenation technology generates most of the trans fats in foods. A reaction where bonds are broken while hydrogen is added is called hydrogenolysis, a reaction that may occur to carbon-carbon and carbon heteroatom bonds. Some hydrogenations of polar bonds are accompanied by hydrogenolysis. Now, the brothers were very interested in this, so they started practicing this. They opened up a lab, which they called Ivorydale, and had their scientists working on it. And after some experimentation, they were able to come up with a creamy, pure white substance that was firm, and it resembled lard. Now, because of this close resemblance to lard, Procter & Gamble decided that they would start selling this to home cooks. They started sending samples to grocers, restaurants, home economists, nutritionists, so that people could start using it and practicing with it and getting a taste for it so that they would start buying this product in the stores. In 1910, they patented this creation under the name of Crisco. They felt this name brought the idea of crispness, purity, and freshness. They implemented different marketing strategies and actually hired a company known as the J. Walter Thompson Agency, which was America's first full-service ad agency. They hired this company to start advertising for them to help them get this product on the market because they knew butter and lard is hard to compete with. Yeah, it is. Their marketing strategies, they started doing things like giving free cookbooks to people who bought this product, and that way they would have different recipes to use this with. They would fry donuts on the side of the street and give them out to people to taste it and tell them, look, it was fried in this oil, not lard or butter or whatever. They started telling people it was healthier than animal fat. That's right. There was zero research done, zero testing done on people before this hit the market. There was absolutely zero research, zero scientific experimentation. They never tested this on people. The way they tested it on people was selling it to them. There were no health regulations at this time, so there were no boxes for them to check in the production of this. And they told people as a marketing ploy that it was healthier than animal fats. And do you want to know something? This sparked the rise in the creation of margarine and the popularity of low-fat foods. We can thank Procter & Gamble for a lot of the suffering health of Americans today, because guess what? This product was never tested. I cannot emphasize that enough. They went with plant oils because it was cheaper than animal fats. So they wanted a cheap production. Then they wanted to be able to sell it to people and get a good profit on it. And they never even discovered if this was healthy for people. And you want to know something about the process of hydrogenation? It is responsible for creating trans fats. Because of the chemical reaction that happens, it turns the, as it's referred to, cis fats into trans fats. And this was not even discovered until the 1990s, when they learned how unhealthy trans fats are. So it was almost a century of people eating this before they even discovered the dangers and carcinogenic properties of this product. In 1912, Procter & Gamble sold 2.6 million pounds of Crisco. And by 1916, the number became 60 million pounds. These men were extremely successful in their efforts, extremely successful in their marketing, and they just happened to trick all of America into giving them their money, giving them their health. Now, I'm not saying there was any ill will meant by these men. We have no idea what their intentions were. Their intentions seem to just be on the business front to make money and become successful. So I'm not going to say any of this was malicious, but I will say that it has caused a lot of sickness, a lot of obesity, a lot of just mental disorders, all from these men trying to cheap out on a product that they wanted to get on the market and never testing it, never seeing how people metabolized it, how it affected them. There was absolutely zero research done into this before they put it on the market. And now what do we see today? We're still being told that vegetable oils are healthy. We're being told they're heart healthy. We're being told they're healthier than animal fats. But where is the science? Where is the proof? And you want to know what's interesting? There's lots of proof that trans fats are dangerous for us to be consuming, but there's absolutely zero scientific proof that animal fats increase your risk for heart disease. Studies found that just by increasing your consumption of trans fats by 2% caused a 23% rise in your risk for heart disease. And let me remind you, there is zero scientific evidence saying that animal fats lead to heart disease. Now, I know you're thinking, but I've heard that they lead to heart disease. Yes, people tell you that. But when you start looking at the science, there is nothing to support those claims. And next time we will discuss how exactly we started getting the phony research that claims that animal fats cause the heart disease when it was really just done by epidemiological studies. We will talk about that in our next segment, because the company that's behind that, I'm sure we all know who's responsible for that one. But this people need to know about. Vegetable oils did not come onto the market because they were magically discovered to be some health food. It is still a marketing ploy to this day, despite the research that we have, despite the information that we have. I mean, for God's sake, we have information that grains are bad for us, and we're still consuming those. We know that pesticides are harming us, and we're still just spraying everything. If there's anything I want you to take away from this, it is that the food industry does not have your best interest at heart. They are looking to line their pockets, and they will say anything to make it sound good. Let's remember that next time you're at the store. Whatever they're marketing as low fat, heart healthy, oh, it's gonna be so good for me. Look at the ingredients. Just look at the ingredients. Could you go outside and pick that up out of the ground? Could you go hunt that down? No, it is something that had to be produced in a factory with all of these disgusting processes that make it not even food anymore. If you can't just eat it straight out of the ground, it's not food. These people are doing crazy chemistry stuff to different plants to try and make them edible, to try and make them taste good. And it is not natural. That is not how we need to be eating. And it's very clear just seeing this information that the suffering health of Americans is drastically due to the introduction of seed oils and different plant oils. Now we know olive oil has been used for thousands and thousands of years. That one is a different story. But these seed oils, I mean, we saw cottonseed oil is basically toxic. We would not be able to consume cottonseed oil without heavy processing. And then after that heavy processing to remove those toxic, bitter bits that are used as male birth control, then they go and they do this whole chemical reaction to make it resemble lard and look appealing to people. We could not just eat this straight out of the ground. We could not just, okay, olives, all you gotta do is press them, the fat comes out. That's it. That's it. Nothing else has to be done. These cotton seeds, I mean, first of all, they're tiny, so you need like a bajillion of them to even get a good amount of oil. And then you have to go through this crazy purification process, doing all this chemical shit to it. Excuse my French there. And then you go through this process of attaching the hydrogen atoms so that you can get it to be a firm substance so that it's more appealing to home cooks and it will resemble the animal fats that they were used to at the time. Now I know today now we have the liquid oil that's easy to use as well. And I think part of that is just we started getting more used to it as time went on. You know, at the time they had to make it appealing to people so that it could replace lard and butter, because they were used to saturated fats that were firm at room temperature. We could not even just drink this straight out of the press. There was so much processing that has to go into it. It is bizarre to me. And you know what? I don't know how many people know this, but when I saw this information, it made me so angry. It made me so angry. How many people's health has suffered because these two men wanted to have a successful business, because they wanted to cheap out on their production costs, because they didn't want to take a few years to test it out on people first and see what happens to their bodies. No, they wanted to just roll it out. Procter & Gamble before then had never had any production in food whatsoever. They were soap and candles, and now we see they have like lotions and all sorts of stuff, and their company is huge. There are so many sub-companies that they own now, and this was their introduction to the food market, and look what it's done. Look what it's done. Unbelievable. So no, animal fats are not bad for you. They do not give you heart disease. They do not result in sickness. In fact, animal fats have been helping me get better. They've been healing my mental health. They've been helping me to become a more functional human being. And I will not stand while they keep getting demonized, because animal fats are the most natural fats there are. That's what humans have been consuming for all of our existence. until recently. It's been over a century now since we started getting introduced to these other fats, and look what has happened to our health since then. Before then, humans were dying from environmental conditions. Of course, there were some illnesses that came up that couldn't be solved with the food we were eating. We don't know the reasons for all those things. A lot of it had to do with not being hygienic. But now, the number one killer of Americans today is food-related disease. And people want to say diet has nothing to do with that. People are dying sooner than they have to. Their weight is out of control. We've never seen anything like this. We've never had an epidemic of people being fat. It blows my mind the way everybody is so talking about diet now and being on a diet and trying to be healthy. Humans have never had to worry about that before. In fact, their main concern was whether or not they would have enough food. Now we've got way too much and way too much of the wrong stuff. That's my little piece there. I hope that you got something good out of this and that maybe you feel a little more educated on this subject. I wanted to bring this forward because it really made me angry to discover this. I want the madness to stop. People need to wake up and realize just what they're consuming, just what it's doing to them. And that your government and their health guidelines and these companies, they are not on your side. They are on the side of money. Thank you so much for watching. I look forward to seeing you in the next video.